The Memphis Grizzlies has for a while have been looking for help at the wing position since Dylan Brooks was traded away and the Marcus Smart acquisition doesn't seem to have worked out. So it seems that they're interested in Dorian Finney-Smith. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you guys think that the player that they would trade if they were trying to get Dorian Finney-Smith, would it be Brandon Clark or would it be Marcus Smart? Let me hear your thoughts and let's get into today's video. This report is coming from Marc Stein of the Stein & Hines Substack.
To me, it makes the most sense that they would trade Marcus Smart. It just hasn't worked out. In theory, Marcus Smart is still a good player. He's just had some injury problems here in Memphis, in that him going to a team like Brooklyn, he could have his value rebuilt. And not only that, they just got rid of Dennis Schroeder, so he would be given the ability to showcase his ball handling and like facilitating skills as a lead guard for the Nets. So I think Marcus Smart might be the guy that you build around. And Dorian Finney-Smith actually makes like $5 million, a little over $5 million less than Mr. Marcus Smart. And I would say that Dorian Finney-Smith is arguably a better shooter and scorer. So with that, you would trade Dorian Finney-Smith, Marcus Smart, and you're like, okay, what's another reason why they would do that? Well, the rationale is Marcus Smart was supposed to be that defensive point of attack defender that they hope would help bridge the gap next to Morant and Desmond Bane. However, due to injuries, and I really just think it's not working. So Dorian Finney-Smith would step in, allow Desmond Bane to slide back to the 2 spot, and instead of being a pure wing and being kind of more of a swing man. And this would have Dorian probably play the 3. And Dorian can can guard 1 through 4, as you have Jaren Jackson Jr. and Santi Aldama in the forward rotation, with Zach Edey being the starting center when healthy, and then when he's not healthy, you have like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Santi Aldama being the front courts, or, rotation-wise, Brandon Clark. So this is why I think they actually would rather keep Brandon Clark, because if they were to trade Brandon Clark, it would have to be like Brandon Clark and John Conchar, who they would have to trade just to save money and to make not only save money, but to make it that they would have basically the cap compliancy. I just think the way you look at it, I think it works out way better if you were to go get a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith, because it just makes sense. We know for years now, there was the Bojan Bogdanovic rumors that the Grizzlies were interested in. There was also the OG Anunoby and the Mikal Bridges. And with Marcus Smart becoming an expiring contract next year, while Brandon Clark actually has 2 more years remaining, I think that's another reason why the Nets would be interested in him, because if he does work out, so like let's say if you do trade Dorian Finney-Smith for Marcus Smart, I think it gives you an option to move off of his contract as an expiring in the offseason easier than it would be if he had another year on his deal. And B, if it does work out, they can resign him to a cheaper deal, which I think all parties would probably be interested in if that were to happen between Marcus Smart and the Brooklyn Nets. Now, just to focus on it from the rest of the video, why the Memphis Grizzlies would like Dorian Finney-Smith. They don't have a true starting wing. Like Desmond Bane is more of a swing man, a large 2-guard 3, while John Conchar and Jake LaRavia, I like John's not really playing anymore. Jake's been fantastic this year. And Jake's more, I think, of like, that Swiss Army knife rotational piece who's really valuable off the bench because he can play with any lineup. While Santi Aldama is more of a power forward. Yes, they've played him at the 3, and I think he's somebody who can play the 3 as a spot player during a rotation. But I really think it's more so, hey, the guy that they need a guy to be that 3. And that's obviously what they thought Zaire Williams was going to be. And it's not. And the other thing is the Nets and the Grizzlies have done business before, and I think both parties have benefited. So I think they have clearly a good working relationship. And Luke Kennard's another guy who, in theory, you could say, oh, Luke Kennard and John Conchar packaged together or in a 3-team trade, because we know the Miami Heat are interested in John Conchar, and maybe you work out deal where John goes to the Heat and Terry Rozier goes to the Nets and Luke Kennard goes to the Heat as well, or to the Nets, just I probably the Heat in this case. And Luke Kennard and John Conchar go to the Heat, Luke and Terry Rozier to the Nets, and then the Nets send Dorian Finney-Smith. So right there, you're saving money, and you created a roster spot to convert one of your two ways if you wanted to. That's another way you could look at it and kill, and maybe even get some assets from the Heat in terms of draft-wise for getting that deal done, even though they don't have much. But I think Dorian Finney-Smith would be an upgrade over Luke Kennard. He would help out. And the thing is if you do trade Luke Kennard, I think Vince Williams and Jalen Wells are two guys who are going to be able to fill that in, plus Dorian Finney-Smith. Those three guys would fill in the three-point shooting. I think Jake's ready, to continue to take more of a role. Same thing with Santi Aldama. And, they still have Gigi Jackson and Scottie Pippen Jr. and Cam Spencer. That's the other thing, is if you do a trade where you do trade like John Conchar and Luke Kennard, which would create a roster spot, then you can convert either Yuki Kawamura or Cam Spencer. In my opinion, you'd probably convert Cam Spencer, as he fits more of a positional need than Yuki and Colin, as Colin is behind Jay and Yuki's behind Scotty. So again, I think bringing in Dorian Finney-Smith, once you look at this team, let's say you did do either the Marcus Smart or the Luke Kennard, John Conchar package, I think having John Morant, Desmond Bain, Jaren Jackson Jr., when healthy, Zach Edey, and Dorian Finney-Smith potentially being like that starting lineup, where then you still have Brandon Clark. In this scenario, we traded Marcus Smart, so Luke Kennard, John Conchar, Santi Aldama, Gigi Jackson, Jake LaRavia, Vince Williams are all there. I just think it makes this team deeper, not only from a shooting standpoint, but you have a point of attack defender who also, Dorian Finney-Smith is somewhat of an Iron Man. Like, Dorian Finney-Smith doesn't miss much time. He usually always plays, and he doesn't do too much. He's a solid rebounder for his size. He has a 7-foot wingspan, and he's a guy who's capable of having a 20-point game at any moment, but he'll give you a solid 10 every night. As I've said earlier, guard the opposing team's best offensive player, which is what they need. And you really would bridge that gap between the guards and the front court. Basically, they needed a guy who can be that connector between the back court and the front court, and I think he would really help them right there. And people don't realize that the year that Jaren Jackson Jr. won his Defensive Player of the Year award, his best defensive pairing on the floor was actually Desmond Bain. So for everybody who wants to talk crap about Desmond Bain and his small arms and as if he's like not a good defender, I would like to push back on that notion and say that like Desmond Bain's a better defender than people give him credit. Either way, I do think that, as we said earlier, that whole John Conchar, Terry Rozier deal, that kind of makes sense to me, and I want to hear you guys' thoughts on that one, if it does or not. But that's it. Like, comment, and subscribe.